Hey MAGFest, how you doing? Welcome to Leveling Up Music History, teaching video game music in online and classroom settings. My name is Jeremy Tellock. I am joined today by Dr. Nicole Harvey. We're going to start with some introductions. Again, my name is Jeremy Tellock. I'm co-owner of Pixel Pond LLC. It's a videography and multimedia company based in the Pacific Northwest. We do a lot in the live event space for video games and indie game events, things like that. I am a recurring guest lecturer at the University of Portland, specifically for Introduction to DAW, which is digital audio workstations. So again, a lot of my teaching is to people who are very interested in music but have never touched an instrument or recorded music in any way. And I will pass it over to Nicole to introduce herself.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole Harvey. I am a PhD in nursing science with my BS in nursing and my BA in piano performance, which for about 20 years, I didn't do anything with. I finished music school, was super burned out. It was all classical music. Anytime I tried to do jazz back in my day, jazz wasn't even considered like credit for your major ensemble. And I was a piano player and I played the piano in jazz band. So it was kind of dumb. They made me sing in the choir and I sucked. It was awful. I got better a bit over time, but I'm still not any good. But anyway, so that's kind of how my music journey really was, very abrupted. And then back 3 years ago, I was approached by our music department in the nursing department from the music school and the nursing school at the University of Portland. Although I typically teach pathophysiology, pharmacology, and nursing research and health assessment, all that stuff, they said, hey, we're interested in creating a video game music focused class. We want to give our students in the music program opportunities for more practical application. Would you be interested in doing it? Because we hear you like video games. And I was like, yes, I do like video games. And then I wrote the first class of its kind. 2.5, going on 3 years now in the making. The class is now part of the university's core humanities curriculum. And instead of it being a music majors focused class, it is now open to all majors, non-musicians, musicians alike, people of all degrees. So this fall, the last time the class was held, I had 3 nursing students, 2 business students, 1 computer science student, 3, I think they were general engineers, 1 psychology student, 1 history student, and 2 business majors. 8 of them developed DAW pieces after Jeremy taught them how. Of those 8, only 2 played instruments or sang. And the other students in the class did a combination of podcast and audio engineering for their final project that semester, out of 15. And max enrollment was, I think, 17. We had 2 drop, something like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
So this session is a follow-up to one that we've done at MAGFest and at a couple other conferences this past year that's really all about Q&A development. And we want to know from you all, we've come and talked about teaching video game music before, and we did a kind of more formal lecture, but we want to hear what kind of questions do you all have? Is there anyone out here who is interested in developing like a video game music class for non-music majors? Is there anyone who is interested in developing a video game music curricula in K through 12 or in higher education, which is primarily our focus? Is there anybody out there who's just looking to add a little music to their classroom? Those are the kind of questions that we're happy to answer. So we have a microphone up here, but to get things started, we're gonna just ask each other one question each just to kind of kick things off. Take a moment and think about what you might be interested in hearing from us about. We're happy to share anything, and I'm also happy after to share the materials from the class with you. I have a syllabus, I've got my course outline, that kind of stuff. We have our QR code and our emails on the final slide, and you can take a look there and reach out to us. We're happy to share. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yes, so I'd like to kick this off with a question for you.
Awesome.
So when the university approached you about this class and said, we want something with video game music, what was the inspiration or what was the thought process behind developing the specific curriculum curriculum that you did? Because you covered so much ground. It wasn't just the history of video game music, but you also incorporated aspects of working with DAWs and creating your own music and things like that. So tell us a little bit about the thought process and kind of what went into developing that first curriculum.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jeremy. So it's really a two-pronged approach. My sort of ethos when creating curricula is I want my students, no matter what they're studying, whether it's science, music, healthcare, it doesn't matter. I want them to come away with a feeling that their time has been well spent. And one thing I remembered when I was an undergraduate was that when I wasn't taking classes that were, directly in my major focus area, it was really hard to see what the point was. And it just felt like I was just wasting my time. I'm 18 years old, I don't know what I'm doing. I was a traditional college student. And looking back, as an educator now, I learned so much from those classes, but I didn't really understand the purpose of it at the time. It was 5-10 years later when I'm suddenly looking back on my core curriculum education and my music education and going, that's what taught me to be a teacher. That's what taught me ethical development and how to teach that to future students. That's what taught me to put a good paper together so I can get accepted to a conference like MAGFest, right? But I didn't recognize any of that at the time. So one of my big missions, this is sort of the first prong, is that all students who are in a class that I'm teaching, whether it's video game music or otherwise, they come away with a feeling like their time was well spent. The second thing is I want it to be accessible, but also independent focused. I want students to come away with this idea that they have created something that they're interested in, and they can be lifelong learners and creators from that starting point. So half of the class that I put together was music history. Interestingly enough, there is a ton of music history in video game music. We started with Pong, and we concluded with the Game Awards this year. So there's a lot in between. A lot of music classes start, I know, in music major programs that have video game music components with CD-ROM and forward. We wanted to start before that and really talk about chiptunes, talk about the earliest sounds that arcade cabinets made in the US and Japan and that kind of stuff too. Those early mechanics, yeah. So that was really an important part of giving them the whole background picture. Sometimes it had to be kind of quick, but the whole background picture for half the class. The second half of the term is then focused on practical application and much more independent study. So this is when we had a tour of guest lectures. So Jeremy came to teach about DAW, digital audio workstation application, because I was a classically trained musician and I can use MuseScore, I can use Finale, kinda, Finale, can anybody really totally use Finale? Come on, yeah, it's crazy. And also I can't afford it, right? And then the DAW workstation, having the DAW interaction, again, practical, accessible, get these students in on the ground floor, even if they don't read music. And then I could show a parallel with, okay, let's write the notes out, a little bit, that kind of stuff. The other guest lectures we had folks from industry and video game music come. We were actually really delighted to be able to work with Grant Kirkhope earlier this past fall, and he is a wonderful human and came and spoke to our class, which was incredible. I'm still grateful. I've never had my hand shake so hard as when I was trying to get the Zoom set up. I'm just I was
going to say, real quick, for those who don't know, Grant Kirkhope was the composer for GoldenEye on the N64, amongst many other rareware games of the time.
He's the original voice of Donkey Kong.
Yeah, on the N64. So Donkey Kong 64, that's Grant Kirkhope.
That's Grant Kirkhope.
Making Donkey Kong sounds.
And he's uncredited in the movies, too. Yeah, and the DK rap, right? Isn't that the other one? Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, but he was a delight. Let's see here. And we've had folks that we've met actually at MAGFest come speak as well, talk about licensure, copyright protection, streaming music on various platforms, and then students do an independent study type project where they have to meet some basic requirements for the course. They have to meet some university core curricular requirements as well, and where they talk about their personal aesthetic development, which means talk about what you like in art and in music. And then they had to do a global perspectives piece where they compared and contrasted whatever their topic was from not only, say, the US, but one other location, preferably across the planet, something like the UK or Japan, China, South America. Those were the ones they picked this year. Yeah. So that's it. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So now I have a question for you, and then for Jeremy, and then we'll open it up to the audience. You can come right up to the mic and just ask us anything you're interested in about video game music and teaching music in the online and in-person environment, because we've done both also, and just whatever else. So my question to you is, I know that we've talked about this before, but when you are teaching students who are non-musicians, what is the benefit of using DAW? And then tell us about your approach to teaching non-musicians video game music using DAW.
Fantastic question. So with people who've never made music before, they may have never touched an instrument, but they know what a piano looks like, right? And in DAWs, some DAWs are very visual. What I like to start people out with, if they've never used a DAW before, is something really simple like FL Studio or GarageBand, you know? Something where there's enough options to get you started and moving on something, but it's not overwhelming, and there's a lot of visual familiarity. Like if there's a good piano roll and it shows a piano, okay, I've seen a piano before, even if I've never played one, I know what it looks like. So using that visual familiarity and getting somebody who can see something, and even if they've never played the instrument, click a few buttons and say, I've made a melody, that's really cool. The approach there is, how many creators in the room? Do you make something? Do you take photos? Do you video? Do you make music? Do you make something creative? Look at all of you. Okay, awesome. Love that. So think way back to when you started this creative thing that you did, and you first figured it out. You unlocked that first step that said, this is the thing that's for me. Do you remember how that felt? That feeling that, okay, that's my thing. That's what I'm going for when I teach somebody DAW. I want to make sure that they make their first beat or their first loop or whatever it is, and it gets them excited to continue wanting to learn on their own, to continue that self-education, that lifelong learning, to always want to get better just because they love the thing. Not because they're training for a job or whatever it is, but I love making music, so I want to get better at that.
Yeah.
Finding that initial spark and lighting that in a student is critical. I would say that's the foundation of my approach.
I love it. And I think you were very successful, because we went from 0 students ever using a DAW to 8 students using it as their final project and asking for feedback on their songs. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So even if nobody's used music before or written music before, again, DAWs are very visual. They can show you with letters what the notes are. So I can give them a progression. I can say C, G, A minor, F. Write that out in your key roll and then play with it. Play with the tempo, add some drums, do some things. And immediately it gets them going. Makes them feel like they're creating something. And sort of setting them in that loop to keep creating, keep building on this little thing that they made has proven powerful.
Yeah, I think it was great. All right, Q&A's open. Come on up if you're interested.
Yeah. Any and all questions?
Yep.
Otherwise, we're happy to just tell stories
riff,
from the class or whatever. Hi.
Hello
Hi,
there.
nice to meet you both.
Nice to meet you.
I do have a quick question. I'm curious, thinking about a program where you have a scoring at a university where the aim is to be a professional writing game music. Thinking about the history of game music, do you have perhaps a few pillars or core things that you would recommend teaching or sharing with students?
Cool. May I start with that one?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a little different than our program, which this is the very first video game music class that has ever existed. And there is only one class about video games outside of this class at our university. However, as the music class became so popular and immediately had an enrollment where they had a wait list or whatever, now what they're thinking about doing is opening a video game minor. And I happen to be on the group that is looking at doing a game minor that has a combination of music and computer science, basically, emphasis. So you have game dev, and then you have composition. And so the things that I think are really important to include, we'll start with music history. I think it needs a lens that showcases more than just the US. And I think a lot of programs that I've looked at the curricula, maybe they just do US and Japan. But that's it. But we know modern game music studios are incredibly international and diverse when it comes to different sounds. I mean, just think about, we did a unit on The Witcher, and just think about so many modern game music tunes and stuff that come from an international focus. So I think trying to find good resources that compare and contrast the music history in the US or in Japan, in the UK, Brazil, wherever you're looking for that stuff. One of the biggest challenges, we're finding some of those sources. So actually last year at MAGFest, I got to go to Brian Clark's panel, and he published a book on media in Japan that influenced video games in the 1980s and up to the early 2000s. So it's about things like celebrities in Japan who then are part of video games. So in the early 2000s and mid 2000s, we had like the NSYNC Get to the Show for the Game Boy Advance, and we have like Michael Jackson's Moonwalker for the Genesis. So they had a lot more of that type of stuff going on in the early days in Japan, and radio programs and games and all this. And I think those lenses and those perspectives were really important for students to sort of just break down the walls of what they think of as being games. Because all my students come in and I go, what kind of games are you guys playing? It's mobile games and Minecraft. So to kind of broaden their perspectives, nothing wrong with mobile games and Minecraft, I'm saying, but I just want to see some broader perspectives and introduce them to new things. So that's one. Two, it's got to be practical application. This is actually the one that was hardest to sell my university on, because their humanities programs are mostly theoretical. And I don't know if anybody else out here who are teachers in humanity programs has run into this too. They would prefer an emphasis on theory and less on practical development. So over time, I have adjusted the class to have an independent project that's the practical development, and we continue to keep the DAW piece, which we had to kind of fight for, actually. And we have an emphasis on discussion, critical thinking, and then again, we have that practical application I think is really important. Right on. Thank you.
Yes, I was going to exactly say that. Video game music history is important to study how it's been applied. Genres have been applied to certain genres of gameplay. To be able to go back and hear music when it was created with such limitations, where they didn't have full orchestras and they didn't have CD, Red Book quality audio. Right. They didn't have Dolby Atmos.
Yeah.
Right. It was you had a synth and a few channels to work with. So to be able to understand how to apply mood and feeling to something so limited all the way up through today, and having an unlimited palette of whatever sounds you could possibly want for your music. I think it's important to see that whole journey and to be able to then apply that to your own music. When you get hired onto a project, you should be able to identify what is the visual mood, what is the gameplay telling me to feel, how does that need to be reflected in my soundtrack. It's the same with any music you're going to write for anything. Video games, advertisements, just professional music. It all comes back to that, what is this going to feel like? What should this feel like first? And having that historical lens, as you so well put it, and all those decades of types of music applied to different genres to create different moods, it's great for inspiration and also great for direction, because working with limitations is great in that it can really keep you focused. And then sometimes, though, if you don't have any limitations, it gets really overwhelming and you need that direction. So to have some sort of visual inspiration or again, a gameplay concept that you can think about and work from is very important and almost crucial to have. It's very rare that you will get a job where somebody says, I want you to make a piece of music for me, and then they don't give you anything. They're going to give you a gameplay snippet. They're going to say, I want it to feel this certain way. So knowing what genres apply to that, super important.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it also reflects how I structure the class assignments. So the students in my class are college everywhere between freshmen and seniors. So they're at all different levels of like writing, doing their homework, all different. It's a fall semester. So some of them, it's their first term in college, and some of them, it's their final term in college. So they're all over different sort of developmental spots too. And one thing that I struggled with in the first 2 rounds of teaching the class was how to build activities and assignments that were in the classroom that really drove engagement, and really came down to, the working within limitations. Set consistent, every single week you know you're going to have this assignment. Every single week it's going to be these parts, and then you build upon that across the semester. So we start out, for instance, as super basic. I've gone totally back away from monster amounts of digital technology and the uploading to the cloud, and we're going to do online exams and all this kind of stuff. I've gone back to okay, you're going to come in, you're going to have a book in your hand, and here's a piece of paper, and you're going to fill that out. Does that sound familiar to anybody out there? Yeah, and as educators, the reason I've gone back that way is pretty much because of ChatGPT. Because students were just going home, plugging and chugging the worksheets or the homework assignments into the AI robots, which actually was kind of hilarious the first time. I showed you some of it the first time that this happened. And we went from nobody was using this to everyone was using it in 1 semester. So it was a huge switch for my students. And one of the students hadn't bought the book. And so they said, well, based on these reading pages, answer these questions on the worksheet. And it made up a fake book. And it made up fake pages. And then this student, they just cut and pasted it into the worksheet. So I reached out to them and was like, so hey, so I've read all of the books on this subject, and this book doesn't exist. So I'm going to have you come in and redo this assignment. But anyway, the outcome of all this is going to these, okay, we're going to fill out a worksheet. And it's consistent. So there's one part that's on the homework reading you got to do, which is all about music history, extended topics. The second question is about your personal preferences around the topic we were discussing for the week. Tell me how this made you feel. Tell me what this made you think, right? I want a reflection on how it inspired and impacted them. I thought this would be the lamest, and this was the best question this semester. I got to hear all about what made these students interested in music or interested in games or both. Okay? And then the third one was something from class. Having students in higher ed get into the classroom and come is a new and more difficult problem that many of us educators have faced in the last 2 to 3 years. Just attrition, students just stop coming to school, just period. That's been a real big problem. I know that's happening in outside of higher ed too. And so just knowing that you got to come if you want the points, it was a motivator in a way that hadn't been before. And we taught some good behaviors like get to class on time, because otherwise you won't have time to fill out the worksheet and then you won't get any points, right? So yeah, basic stuff, structure and consistency. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience?
You can just raise your hand too if you don't want to get up to the mic.
That's fine.
We'll just repeat it back. Go for it.
Sure, yeah.
I'm curious to get more information about something Jeremy mentioned about breaking it down for students who don't have any musical or recording or any other experience in that realm. But also, I assume has to come with an understanding that if people listen to music, like you said, like they know what a piano looks like, they can understand the piano roll. And they listen to music. There's things they like about it. You're asking for their opinions. But where can the assumptions take you too far? So how do you know how far to break it down to, so you're not accidentally applying your professional lens to it and assuming more knowledge than you actually have?
This is a fantastic question because it is so easy to fall into when you're a professional and you've been doing this for decades. So the question is, how do you not let your where's the cutoff point for somebody who's brand new with music? Yeah. Where's that cutoff point to where you're not overwhelming them with too much, high-level professional knowledge? For me, I stick to 4 things in the DAW. They've got a sequencer, they've got a timeline, they've got a mixing board, and they've got the piano roll. So those 4 things. I want you to make me a song with those 4 things alone. After they start getting the hang of making those loops, they're going to come back and they're going to say, okay, so I'm making my loops, but something's off. I don't like how this sounds. I want this to be more realistic, whatever it is. And you can kind of build it with them from there. But when we're doing introduction to DAW and this, we're doing this at light speed. They've got maybe a week,
right.
So that's why I'm sticking to these 4 core principles, and I'm saying these are the 4 things. Yeah, there's knobs and switches and buttons everywhere. Don't worry about that.
Right.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about my drums don't sound hyper realistic. Don't worry about my bass isn't amazing. Go with that. Introduce them to the built-in synthesizer, to whatever DAW you're using. I know in FL there's one Citrus that's been around for ages, and it's got dozens of sounds in it. So what I like to tell students is, okay, you've got your default drum kit, and then you've got Citrus. Let's make a loop with that. And that'll usually get them started. Because within that synthesizer, they'll find presets that'll get them to strings or, buzzy EDM type stuff, if that's what they want. But sticking to those 4 core things and kind of breaking it down to, think about it as when we're professionals, what is our process, right? If I break it down really to that very base level, those are the 4 things that I'm working with. And I'm maybe getting a little more detailed into what I'm doing in the mixing board and stuff like that. But you can really get started and make some awesome stuff by just moving the faders up and down, panning left and right a little bit, and arranging your loops. That'll take you a really long way. And again, looking for that spark. Once they've learned that, then they say, oh, cool, music production is my thing. They'll kind of figure out their path from there.
Just a quick story from class. So one thing that we've done now in doing this 3 different times, the first implementation through, we only had 2 days assigned for guest lecture instruction. And after the first day, we went, okay, the new rule is it's got to be 3 days, and we're going to make a prep unit, because students do not, and again, they're all ages and all disciplines, so the expectations from where their home major is are going to be different. They did not all show up 100% ready to go. I know, big shock, right? No way! Because to do a DAW immersive day, you have to have the software installed on your computer. You have to have headphones, right? And you have to be able to open it. I know that sounds like basic, but those are the 3 days are very beneficial. Plus, there's always, we had somebody was sick, or somebody's dog ate their homework, or they got in a car wreck, whatever. There's always something. So you created a prep lecture that was recorded, which is excellent. That's 10 minutes, everything you need to know. We sent out ahead all the information about what software requirements they needed. We use FL Studios, if anybody's familiar with that, instead of Cubase or Pro Tools, because you can get a free version that is fully unlocked. You just can't save your project and reopen it.
The demo is
immersive.
Very, very versatile.
Right.
And you can use it for classroom setting. And then if they like it, it's $100. I think,
exactly.
to get the full thing.
Right. You can use
and
whatever.
For somebody
DAW,
who's just starting, that's absolutely great.
Right.
Pro Tools is obviously where you want to end up. If you're going to be in the industry eventually, that's what's going to be asked of you. But honestly, if you're a contractor, you can use just about anything you want. Nobody cares. Does it sound good? That's what they care about.
Right.
I've made stuff in like mobile app GarageBand that I've used in videos, and nobody says anything about it. If your stuff sounds good, it sounds good.
Sounds good. Yeah. The other thing is we usually run into with new programs or new courses and ideas is budget. First question they ask is, what's the budget going to cost? How much is this going to be? And so we said it's going to be free. It's $30 for the books. They can share them. They wanted me to have books for some reason too, because originally I wanted a textbook-free class, but they came back and said, we think you should have a book. I was like, all right, sure. So we have Brian Clark's book, Buy It from Limited Run or Press Run or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And then the DAW, instead of it being buy a student edition, which is about $100, we were able to do that for free. Then if they want to, there is a student discount, and most of the big software companies have the student discounts for the DAWs that they can access by just putting in their student ID numbers and that kind of stuff, or get a note from the department chair. But with non-musicians, you don't necessarily want to shell out $100 for something that you might, only use for 3 days of class. So we wanted to keep this cost effective for our students, and we didn't want them to feel any sort of limitations coming into the class that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. The limitations is not having those limitations is important because, again, our job is to introduce them to it, and that's why I kind of cut it off there. Is the introduction because Another thing is as you grow in your own professional journey, you're going to kind of find your own niche, right? You might make a specific genre of music, and that's going to have a completely different set of rules and you know, production best practices than any other genre. Like right now, working on some video game music and indie project. But it's a huge difference to, say, produce EDM, electronic music, and then, you know, if we do a rock track, I'm bringing in external instruments. And those two worlds couldn't be farther apart as far as production goes. There's some things that cross over, but in general, there's very specific things you want to do in each of those. So by getting that base start of, okay, this is what everything uses just as a base, and then see where that takes you. What do I want to do with it? And then you'll find the details from there.
Yeah, it made sense. I was just thinking back to some of the projects that students did with DAW for their final. So one of them wrote everybody played Hollow Knight Silk Song, right? So one of them wrote a tribute song to one of the characters in Silk Song who did not have their own tune. So that was cool. And I do not remember what character that was. I'm so sorry. I haven't played Silk Song, just my son. Okay. And another wrote this student was a baseball player, college baseball player, and he wrote music that was supposed to be for the next year of the MLB Get to the Show game. So what it would sound like in 2026. We had another student write a new pretend it's a Tony Hawk game track. That was great. He was very inspired to come to class. He was very excited for DAW Day. He thought that was great. So yeah, so it was all sorts of interesting things. And it's so great to see how little stuff these students need to really get started nowadays. You know, it's just headphones, computer, and the software, and they're off and running. And that's how come we got so many of them making music by the end of the semester.
Oh yeah, when I 20-ish, 25-ish years ago when I made my first demo for a band, my terrible garage band, we had to like mic up the guitar amp and plug the guitar into a pedal board that went into the amp, and then just to get the kind of sound we wanted, and now you just plug it into your interface and you're good to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, technology's come a long way. If you are interested in making music, now is definitely a good time to get into it.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. Who else has questions?
Yes.
So video game music history is such an enormous and multifaceted topic. I just wonder, how do you even design a syllabus? What criteria do you use to choose what gets included or what doesn't, or what order do you teach it in? It's overwhelming to even think about.
That's a great question. The question was, what's the criteria for teaching what goes into video game music history, the class? So when I first said, yes, I will teach this class, I said, but can I have a year-long one? And they said, no. I thought, because clearly you could do a before CD-ROM and after CD-ROM very easily. There's so much material. But it is a huge win, at least in my perspective, to go from a school that had no classes in video games at all to now we have one in game design, which is like a senior project type class. And now we have one in music, video game music history, open to all majors. So I said, great, thank you very much. It's a great place to get started. So what I did for the introduction to history was pretty much 3 steps. First, I crowdsourced. I asked everybody I knew, everybody I could access who likes video games, musicians and non. What would you put in a music history class? Who would you include? Give me your list. I reached out to my friends on Discord, Twitch, YouTube, Blue Sky. What's the other? What else am I missing? Facebook, Instagram. Yeah, anybody I could think of, social media. Knocked on doors, called friends on the phone. What would you put in this? What would you put in this? And started to see some things sort of coalesce. So everybody said, well, I teach about Mario and Zelda. Yes, do that. But what else? What else would you teach about? That's where I learned about the Capcom women composers of Japan. That was awesome. We put a piece in there about that, and I tried to also then fit it within whatever the requirements were for the class I'm creating. So class requirements would have global perspectives. Great. So that opens the door right there. I'm not going to just pick composers from one country. I'm going to have to give a tour of a lot of different ones. So that's the first thing, was just what would you like in a video game music history class? Ask the people who've been playing video games that are my peers. Great. Second thing I did in that sort of crowdsourcing, I went around and found other people's syllabi online. Sorry if you wrote a video game music class and I looked at your syllabi and I didn't call you up, but I just said, what are people putting in their syllabi? And that's where I saw that most of them were starting at CD-ROM. And I thought, actually, I want to start before that. I want to start with the first sound chips and boards and what that sound was. So that was the second thing I did, just looked and saw what other people were doing. And then after that, the next step was, what could I find actual resources on? Because that is the other thing that became very limiting. There are some composers that I just could not access a lot of information on, or companies that I couldn't find a lot of information on. You can find a lot of information on Koji Kondo. You can find a medium amount of music, or amount of information on Toby Fox. But you can find, for like, say, Christopher Larkin for Hollow Knight, you can find he's very quiet and doesn't really do a lot of talking to people and writes Hollow Knight. It's like, oh. So I sort of had to think about how I included it and then going, okay, well, what do we know about this? The other thing I do with that, with the development of it, is I ask the students in the very first week, this is the third tier, as I say to the students, what do you want to learn about? And I send out a survey. And they take a piece of paper and a pencil and they tell me, I want to learn about, and they all say, Minecraft, mobile games. And I said, what about Pokemon? Or something, you know, I try to think of other things that maybe in child. Mario, Sonic, who wants to hear about Crash 40? That's where we're going next, you know. And it's fun. And I got some really interesting things from students. So one thing in the last two classes that they really wanted included in the music history was history of rhythm games. And that was very surprising. Many students want to know, tell me about arcades in the early days, in the 70s and 80s. Tell me about rhythm games and the 3DS, because for them, the 3DS was something their big brothers and sisters had. And their first console was the Switch for some of them. I know. It used to be I could say their first console was the Wii. No. That's what their big brothers and sisters and their cousins and aunts and uncles had at their house. It was the Wii. What's a Sega, you know?
I'm so old.
Yeah. So finding the three things together is what's available and what are people interested in, putting that all in a big pile, and then doing my best to sort of curate a global selection. 2 was, what can I find information actually on? And 3, what are the students actually interested in? Because I want them to come away with this value that they're feeling in the moment from the class itself. Yeah. And then, of course, all my lectures take way too long, and I always run out of time, and we never get to all the things I want to get to. So that's where the independent study and the homework come in. Pretty much.
Yeah, it was fun to kind of go through the tier list and be like, what needs to be.
Yeah.
I think a big part of that was looking at generationally, like the
Right.
console generations, and then what was happening in PC around that time as well. Because PC is its own, you know, computer gaming is its own fascinating sound history. I mean, we had to deal with system speaker sounds at one point, which is just literally beeps and boops. But yeah, looking at that generationally in consoles and seeing what was the difference in sound chips. Like in the 16-bit generation, the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, the main two consoles at the time, just you couldn't have had more different sounding sound chips.
Yeah.
Very distinct, and even games that were, you know, the same game, but just released on the different consoles would have, even if the track was the same, it was a wildly different sound. And
Right.
a lot of times they would just change the track out altogether because it just wouldn't fit right.
Yeah.
You know, you couldn't take something that was composed for the Super Nintendo necessarily, bring it over to the Genesis and have it sound the same or have that same depth that you would want it to.
Right.
And the same in reverse. The Genesis had a bit more of a scratchy kind of rock and roll metal perfect sound chip. So trying to bring that over to the Super Nintendo always, to me, it always made it sound a little too warm. So finding interesting changes within the generations. After a while, it kind of disappeared, and everybody's just using Dolby whatever in their console. But things were really fascinating back in the 64-bit and prior days.
Yeah, when we got to the GameCube, then things start sounding like just a better GameCube, right? When it came to audio quality in the consoles. And So what I would do to showcase I'm not a sound audio engineer. I was a classically trained musician, and I'm a nursing professor. I teach about pharmacology and how to survive cholera, maybe even on the Oregon Trail. Stay tuned next semester. But really, audio engineering and the hardware schematics and manufacturing, all that stuff for classic consoles, way above my pay grade. So I again, reached out to a lot of people I know, but I also just tried to read a lot about it and watch a lot of videos from experts. So one of my classes at the start of the term has Tiger Electronics in it, and I have a clip from Cinemassacre because I mean, the AVGN's slides, YouTube, I put it on my slides, but YouTube where he talks about the different Tiger Electronics, there's some clips of that I couldn't find anywhere else on the internet, the information about Tiger Electronics from that era. So just pulling from a lot of different sources, definitely didn't tell the music department chair about that, but it's fine. And then trying to sift through and then teach my students as well to find reliable sources. Again, another one that sticks out is when they use AI and LLMs, because they say things like, Koji Kondo was totally a self-taught musician. No, he went to the University of Osaka Music School, period. He was not a self-taught musician. So teaching students how to sift through some things on the internet. And sometimes, we're reading, IGN and Kotaku to get information. But yeah.
The thing is it's all very new.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of professors of video game music specifically.
We're getting there, but
a lot of professors of music and the study of music itself has been, widely spread throughout education for a long, long time. But specifically in regard to video games, it's relatively new. So to Nicole's point, it is very difficult to sometimes find sources and information, reliable information, not just kind of stories from back in the development days. But yeah, it can be a challenge sometimes.
Go ahead, yeah.
I'm curious about that, actually.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because of a bias against gaming in general? Because we just consider digital media, because we have streaming content and streaming music like Spotify, that's important, right?
Yeah. Yes, you totally can.
Yeah.
Go for it. So the question was?
Yes, the question was, perhaps is video game education specifically, is there a bias against it? As we've seen in many societal, issues when it comes to video games, people see it as not really a true art form. I think that's bullshit. Video games are not just an art form. They are a collection of art forms done at the highest level. You've got writers, you've got directors, you've got artists, voice actors, physical actors, you name it. That creative aspect is probably present in a video game somewhere. So while I think it has taken time to become accepted as something that should be studied and taught and majored in, I think we're finally getting there. Especially with more modern games, as they get more cinematic and they incorporate more filmic and story elements. And as that continues to evolve, I think it's getting really hard to deny that video games are art.
Totally. And I think you're 100% right. There is a bias that exists, and we're now turning the page on that. And I think that is really the that's the nail on the head. I don't think my music director chair would mind me sharing, but he approached me and he said, here's the thing, I want our future music program graduates to be able to do more than be a chair in the Oregon Symphony or a church piano player or soloist. And there's nothing wrong with that, but he wanted more career opportunities. The other thing they've developed is an arts administration major that's only in its second year that parallels along with this course. And it's got different tracks, and I'm not part of that. That's a little outside of my scope, but there is a new push in the arts and music disciplines. I think particularly in my area and on the West Coast, I know there's a big video game music program down in Berkeley, and there's other ones down in California, but there just aren't ones up in Oregon and Washington, except for DigiPen, in the same way as some other locations back east, I know. So there's a push. Finally now people are waking up and going, hey, this is a thing that some kids could get jobs to pay the rent in. Let's teach them how to do it. The challenge where also at my school is we didn't have anybody qualified to teach them, and that's how you end up with a nursing professor. On the flip side, it's also been an incredible uphill push to get this class off the ground. A lot of conversations about what do they want and what do I think and what we've discussed going in. It's a challenge. So my music chair has been incredibly supportive, and we've had a lot of important conversations. More, go for it. Yeah.
Why do you think there's a bias?
That's the age-old question.
Yeah.
I mean, video games have been viewed as a nerd thing ever since I was interested in them back in the late 80s. And I've continued to love that through today. I think it goes back to when, we all remember the video game industry collapse when Atari killed everything, right? And when Nintendo brought it back, the NES was marketed as a toy. And I think that stigma kind of stuck with video games for a long time. Not that this is an interactive multimedia format. This is a toy that we're buying for our kid and they're bringing into their house. So when the Super Nintendo comes out, okay, it's Nintendo 2. It's still a kid's toy. I think that stigma really stuck with it for a very long time. And it took up until we started doing really cool cutscenes and having voice acting and really awesome stories to kind of start to peel that away. And it's only recently, I would say, within the last maybe 10 years that it's becoming less of a stigma, but it's still there. And, I can't say for sure. I can speculate that it has to do with that initial rebranding of being a toy or just nerd culture in general. Not everybody gets it. I love MAGFest. We're all a bunch of nerds.
They're all my favorite nerds at MAGFest.
Exactly. Yeah. I love it, but I understand that maybe that's not for everybody. I wish folks were just more positive about things they didn't maybe identify with or understand.
I think that's it. I was just going to say, I think you really hit on it's just a cultural perspective, perhaps, in some spaces. And unfortunately, I think my experience in higher ed has often been that gaming was not considered an appropriate either area of research or of discourse for serious academics. Joke's on them, I've never been a serious academic, but I did my last conference I talked about how I teach pathophysiology and teach how inflammation and biodefense works with Batman. So they have a really hard time telling me that to be a serious academic in the first place. I'm just a mess all the time. So, but back on this subject, I had people laugh in my face when I told them that I'm teaching a video game music class. And then it's also one of the more successful core curricular courses offered. So it's about engaging the student interest. This is why I'm really excited that the school is really looking into putting together a minor now, because I think, again, it's showing the relevance and significance. And I talked about how challenging it was to find good resources for the class, but I want to swing back to that really quick, because it's not that there isn't great academic research in this area. There is. The Ludomusicology group out of the UK and internationally are incredible researchers. They put together wonderful subject matter, and there's beautiful journals that are out there. There's international conferences, MAGFest included, about video game music. But it's not what I want to say, translated down to the undergraduate textbook level. So what I'm doing often is curating different things together. So some of the books we've read, you and me both, we've read the Doom Guys books to talk about. I don't know hardly anything about PC gaming. Jeremy grew up primarily playing PC games and is a huge Doom fan, so I got to learn all about the Johns, Romero and Carmack, for my students. I didn't know very much about the influence of metal and how that influenced PC gaming and Mick Gordon and Doom and all that kind of stuff. I didn't grow up playing FMV games. I missed out. The only one I played was Oregon Trail 2. So I learned about the influence of FMV games and the music and audio and the CD-ROM era and stuff like that. And some of these books that we've read, there was the Ludomusicology text, which is game sound and something about video game music, and I can't remember the full title of it, but it's from those authors out of the UK, Karen Collin and Tim Summers. So those are fantastic books, and I use chapters out of both of them in my class. Brian Clark's book is very accessible about the media and design in Japan and its influence in the US. And then I've used segments out of a women's in gaming book. I've read a Koji Kondo 33 and a third little tiny mini book and used some excerpts of that. Gosh, I'm trying to think of the other one. I said the Doom books. I'm definitely forgetting one or two, but I pulled little pieces here and there and then pulled those in for reading for my students. Yeah. And then I assign YouTube series sometimes too, as long as they get approved by the department. Sometimes a little bit tough to find.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So you talk a lot during this panel about contrasting traditional music and coming up with a video game. When it comes to comparing this to say music theory or music history that already has a lot of established curriculum, is there something specific about video game music that was extra rewarding or extra novel in how you were able to teach it to students that probably would have never been exposed to learning about fifths and sevenths and all the things you learn from a music theory course that you found to be really rewarding and say, hey, maybe this is something that going back to the music students, we might want to consider looking at this as part of their curriculum.
Awesome.
You want to take that? Or
Yeah,
I'm happy to.
I'll get that one started.
Sure.
So the question was, let me know if I got this right, just basically sort of the inspiration and the connection between traditional music education, where you're teaching music theory and the traditional, sort of tomes of music history, and then how that is influential and how it connects with video game music. So because this class is non-musicians, none of them have to take any of the music core. So none of them knew how to do music theory. None of them, nobody knows who Bach is, forward and on forever, except for the one music major that we get from time to time. So it's very interesting to see that blend. So what I think is the most important connection in the class is actually the in-class discussion, where all these students with different tastes and interests and aesthetic preferences come together and share that. And so I try to set up the classroom space to sort of drive that. And then I like to have the aha moments that Jeremy talked about in the different sort of units for the class. So the earliest unit we call the early arcades to the 8-bit. So basically it's Atari arcades, and the early days of computers and games. And so those students, the aha moment is realizing that you can have music and sound when it's just a beep. So I get them thinking in a non-traditional music education space around what does sound mean to us as humans. I get them thinking about the Space Invaders, and how scary that sounds as it speeds up, the emotional element of 4 stinking notes, right? And how that it hits, and I play them a little bit of Space Invaders, and I make the screen black so they just hear it, and I ask them how it makes them feel, and it's like the first class, that kind of stuff. So it's really using sound, not just music. I think that's the unique hook that we have. Another one, I have to say, the first time I taught the PC unit, I wasn't really that knowledgeable. So we used mostly modern PC gaming music. Now I included the old days PC speaker, and
Yeah.
That's awesome. And it was just, again, showing that progression of how music based on technology has evolved, I think was really unique.
So why video game music specifically? When I started making music, it was just to make music and develop songs, write songs for myself, because I really liked writing. It was the first time that I put some music to a video that something clicked, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. So music on its own is very powerful, but it can take another media platform and elevate it so far beyond what it is without music. So video games, you get to be interactive with it. It's not just a visual element. So as Nicole said, the best video game soundtracks and sound design, in my opinion, are ones that use non-traditional sounds for things like sound effects, where the sound engineers are really not just creating great music that sets the mood, but everything that you interact with in that game is musical. Great examples of this would be like Portal from Valve.
Yeah.
Every button you push in Portal has a neat little not mechanical sound. It's almost musical. Same thing with the Mario Wonder for the Switch. Every jump, every button, every block that you hit in that is a musical instrument. Even the jump sound is like it's a bent, like a ukulele or something like that. So that's why I think it was really important to kind of zero in on video game music, because it's such a creative platform. You can do so much more than write a song.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Kind of piggybacking off of your last question, do you believe that having a background in classical history theory, orchestrating, will give you an advantage in one of these more contemporary, I guess, like digitalized type of music courses? Or do you think that it's because it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges, it just doesn't matter if you have it or not?
So the question was, does having a background in classical music and classical music education and training give you sort of leverage in contemporary musical areas? What I'm about to say may surprise the class, but no. The thing that no, but the caveat is, it got me in the door to design a class because I have a degree from that school. So they were like, yeah, she's got a music degree, sure. That was as far as the check went. I'm rusty. I still make music and I still practice, and I love being creative with music. But I am not up to the skill level of many of my contemporaries in the music department. And it's something, there's plans for 2026, right? But I think that what it did was just get my foot in the door to get the class started. But really, it was my background in teaching and education that got the class off the ground. So if you had a background in gaming, computer science, even business, with a creative bent, background in history, right? International studies, global studies, all those things you could present in higher education. You could present your idea to teach a video game music class, and I think it would be very successful. Outside of that, Jeremy, I'm going to throw this one to you. Do you think you need a background in classical music to develop video game music?
I do not have a background in classical music. I've been writing music for over 25 years. So you can be taught software, you can be taught theory. The best musicians and the ones that stick with it, they're doing it because they love it. They just love music. They like the instruments. Maybe they like a piano, or like me, it was the guitar. First time I plugged in a guitar, threw on some distortion, I was like, oh, this is my thing. Yes, I love this. Now I'm going to learn about all the other stuff. Make music. Yeah. So I think that while it certainly helps to have some classical training, it's not necessary. What would be useful in that classical training is to really learn what chord progressions you like. Because chord progressions, they basically drive the mood and the feeling of your music. If it's going to be happy, sad, if it's going to be tense, that's all going to be set in your progressions. So learn a few that you like, and start experimenting with those. And then, one day throw one of the notes on some other scale. Just see what happens. Yeah, so it can be useful because it is good to know some progressions, but these days you can open up Google and just, what's a good metal progression? And, start playing with that. So very helpful, but not necessary.
I remember, so I had a friend that taught a class as well on college nearby, and it was like either you had a master's, you had like 10 years of experience, or you were published. And I was curious if you guys, I know I came in really late, but I didn't know if y'all have ever been published before, that also added to that too.
Yeah, so my position at the University of Portland, I'm an associate professor with tenure in the School of Nursing. So my main job is in nursing school. I publish articles about stuff that doesn't exist anymore. I'm changing gears post-COVID. this kind of a thing happens. My current interest or my current research projects that are been accepted for conferences are on student use of AI and their like impetus as to why they might want to use it, and also studying ethics among students. So that's cool. Those things have nothing to do with video game music. I have an album out, but yeah, that's self-published. So the reason it works where I work is because we have academic freedom to explore topics outside of our main interest area. Not all schools allow that. My school, we are a teaching-focused institution, and exploring your expertise in teaching is highly encouraged. If you're an R01 school, they may be looking for more specific academic criteria. Jeremy is an industry professional working in the space of music and games. As an industry professional, he is a recurrent invited guest lecturer as part of the music program.
Yes, I got my start in this. I was in the B2B industry, like a big office type building, and I developed some software with a team that we got patented. We needed some multimedia to promote said software, and then there was nobody else qualified in the entire 1,500 person organization. So picked up my camera, I did some editing, and well, that evolved into the business that we have today. But over the years, published I wouldn't say published, but you know, stuff gets posted onto TV, advertisements, online, music, and various things. Even done some voice acting for a indie game that hopefully comes out someday.
Yeah.
But yeah, great
it's good stuff.
And I think that's at time.
We're pretty much at time, I think, from the back. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I want to add a final thought because I think we've talked about this a bunch. And there's our contact information. You can scan that QR code. I didn't bring any of my academic business cards as they're a few years out of date, but this is our Pixel Pond website. You can just reach out to us there, info@pixelpondllc.com, or you can reach out to me at harveyn@up.edu and Jeremy at pixelpondllc.com. And we're happy to take any questions you might have. My final thought that I wanted to share was something that you and I have talked about a lot, and we've heard from other guest lecturers too, both at MAGFest and in the classroom, is if you get the opportunity as a student or a professional to try something new and they say, hey, can you do this thing? You go, you bet, mate, I'll go home and learn.
Even if you don't know how to do it, just be like, yep, I can do that.
I can do that. I can do that, and that is
Best piece of advice I've ever gotten.
Yeah, me too, and it's opened so many doors. Can you teach a video game music class? You bet I can.
Yeah.
Talk to me next week. It took me 6 months, but we got there, right? Yeah, good
Absolutely.
stuff.
All right, thanks everybody for coming to the panel. You've been an amazing
Thank
audience.
you.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, a lot of fun.